Anyone else? Anyone else would like to address the board on any issue? One last call. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board on any issue? Hearing no further comment, the public comment period is declared closed. If you would, allow me just a moment to, and again, it's something that the board generally does not do, is address issues that are brought before a public comment period. But I do believe this particular one, as far as the Frog Level Rescue Squad is concerned, is certainly one that needs to be discussed and talked about. The board certainly appreciates what you've had to say this evening about the Frog Level Rescue Squad. I can assure you that this board, when the recommendation was made, there was a great deal of discussion. It was not an issue that was taken lightly. It was one that we took very serious. It is one that we wanted to make sure that there was coverage for the Don Frog Level, Reedy Church area before it was agreed that this squad would be closed temporarily. It has never been the intention or the desire of this board to close the Frog Level Rescue Squad. That is not what this is about. We have never indicated that this is something that wanted to be done. And unfortunately, it is like lots of things, when there are people involved, the things just cannot be discussed publicly, to be quite honest with you. When the recommendation came to our board, I don't recall how long we spent, but we spent a good time, a good long time talking about it. Probably, I don't know, it took up the whole session that we had set aside for this issue. And there are some things that have been going on for years. I can remember probably about 4 or 5 years ago, it was pretty much closed at that time. There were certainly a lot of issues had to be corrected in order to keep moving ahead. And they just seem to have not fully recovered and fully corrected themselves. So the people that think or have been told that this is a permanent closure of Frog Level Rescue Squad, that is totally not true. It's just absolutely no truth in that. We asked the chief to present some conditions, and I think Mr. Collison has indicated he has received those and certainly is working to address those and his people. And once those issues have been addressed, you're going to be back up and running. But I will also assure you that if it had happened at Ladysmith Rescue Squad or at Ladysmith Fire Department, I would have been just as determined to make sure that was corrected, and if it meant closing it down temporarily until the corrections were made, I would have supported that just as hard as I support what happened here. It's certainly not picking and choosing sides here and saying that we don't care as much for Frog Level. That is not true. I believe every member on this board that has a rescue squad in their area or a fire department in that area, they want it run efficiently and effectively and beyond reproach. And that's all we're asking for here. So please understand that if it had happened in Ladysmith, I'd have been just as determined to get the problems corrected and the situations straightened out. I'm glad to see so many people here. I really am, from the Frog Level and Don area that support the rescue squad. And it's going to take everybody working together. You as citizens in Don, the board, the emergency services staff, and the other volunteer organizations, pulling together, working together to make it a viable organization. And it can be, it has been. Mr. Fields, I remember quite well, where you and Mr. Quash ran a lot of calls on the western side of the county. I remember that, and I know that, and we appreciate that. And please understand, we're not here to hurt you. And it was never the intention of trying to provide a lesser service to the people of the Don Frog Level area. But we felt like, after all the information that had been given to us through staff, that you were probably not getting the service that you thought you were getting, and certainly not getting the service that you deserved. And so that is that's the decision of the board, and those are things that we took into consideration. Yeah, I mean, the conditions, you know what the conditions are, Mr. Collison, and I trust you've shared, and you did tonight, share what those conditions were, but I trust you've shared it with the people that you certainly serve in the Dawn and Frog Level area. I don't have to sit here and tell you what they are. You know what they are. And it appears that you've come a long way in correcting those problems. Just keep working on that. Now, if you want somebody to place your anger on and your concern on, then certainly if you want somebody to meet, I believe that, Mr. Underwood represents you in that area, and I do believe I've found him to be one that wants to hear what the people have to say, and so I think he would. If you want a meeting, I think you would be agreeable to meet with him. Okay, all right. Got you. Right. Got you. Okay. So I mean, meetings have been held. Got you. All right. We appreciate you coming out. Really do. It's good to see everybody out this evening. We appreciate what you've had to say. Mr. Collison, keep us posted, and anything we can do to help, let us know. Okay? Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, but I mean, that's what we need
Okay.
to reinforce.
All right. Let's take a 5-minute recess, and we'll let everybody get squared away. We'll reconvene the Board of Supervisors meeting. The next item on the agenda is unfinished business. Item number 3, discussion of options to comply with FCC mandate to narrowband public safety radio system. Mr. Cully, are you going to?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. We did obtain some new information, as you're aware, from Earl Sharp to contact David Warner, a radio engineer in the Public Safety Communications Division with VETA. And he did inform us this week, and with a follow-up, that he felt that we could apply for a waiver that was a 2-year waiver that would be standalone 700 megahertz system, along with a partnering option with a adjoining jurisdiction, whether that be Spotsylvania or Hanover. And so we sort of changed our recommendation a little bit from, and it would not necessarily require a contract to be signed. You would have to have the system complete within that 2 years, which would give you a window to make a few determinations on which way you wanted to go over the next month or so. But I think you would still, have to have something as you move forward if you're going to complete, as we talked about before, 18-month time frame to get a system installed.
Okay. Board have any questions? Mr. Black?
Yeah, I actually have a couple here. I was looking at your memo, and first of all, again, Mr. Sharp, I want to thank him for that. I think it brings up some key issues I think that we've addressed tonight as a board is citizen input and things like that, because we had a committee that was working on this, correct? Plus the Board of Supervisors, and it was a citizen, Mr. Sharp, who gave us obviously a contact here. I think in future investments, stuff like that, I think we're really going to need to get citizen input. Mr. Akers had mentioned that before, because obviously this is, we were getting ready to make a decision, I think, tonight, one way or another, and now all of a sudden, kind of a curveball for us. I guess the questions I have for you is if you turn to the second page of the memo, where it says, basically full faith efforts being made to complete the narrow banding. It says identifying a time frame for completion. I mean, do we, like, what do you, that and then key milestones, exactly, can you explain that a little bit to me? And proof that funds, and the third thing is proof that funds have been appropriated. What exactly, I mean?
Key milestones would obviously be things like where you've signed an actual contract, and then the system is under construction, when you anticipate installation of the system, testing of the system, and then when you would, go on the system. So that one thing they want to know, it's my understanding from various sources, is when you will be off of the wideband VHF frequency, when you would stop using that.
Okay, maybe I'm a little bit confused then, because we're saying here that we don't need a contract tonight, correct? We don't need to.
You don't need it tonight or maybe December 4th to submit the waiver, is what we've been told. We had read the guidance that had come down from the FCC. There's a guidance memo packet that's been out for a couple of years and updated, and most all of the waivers that have been granted have had a signed contract with a laid out schedule of timing of the system when they got the waiver. But what we've been told by Mr. David Warner with VITA is that he believes we could still get a waiver as we discuss our option of whether we're going to do standalone and sign a contract with our current vendor, or whether we're going to do a modified version where we either partner with Spotsylvania or partner with Hanover.
Well, all right, and I guess that was the other thing at the last meeting we had talked about. One of the things that we had talked about with the Spotsy system was the fact that we just didn't have enough information from Spotsylvania because they were going through their process, correct?
That is correct.
Will this give us enough time to wait to get the information from Spotsylvania?
It should.
It should. Now, just out of curiosity, hypothetically, what if Spotsylvania were to go with, say, a different vendor?
They have.
Their vendor of choice is different right now, but
Right.
they
Right.
haven't
They
negotiated
haven't signed a contract.
So they haven't technically gone with another vendor yet. But their vendor of choice is different than our vendor of choice.
Right, okay.
I think it still allows us to talk to Spotsylvania now that they've selected a vendor and get some ideas of what that system would look like, so that we could price out what we think that is, along with whatever prices that they may charge us, either in a lump sum, a yearly lump sum, or a subscriber-based rate.
So even though they have their vendor of choice is different, we're still allowed to.
We can't negotiate with their vendor.
Okay. Okay. I got you.
We can get some preliminary numbers from Spotsylvania staff to try to make an educated assumption. The key parts of that are still the same things as before, that you would have to find out what are they going to charge us, because we would be using their systems. The way these shared spillover coverages work, there would be talk groups assigned on their system for the use for Caroline Sheriff, fire and rescue, and that type of thing. So we'd be taking up their capacity. We would not have any of our own frequencies on their system. We'd be using and riding on their frequencies. And then the radios automatically switch over if you're in Caroline, where you're then on the towers that are in Caroline, riding on our 700 frequencies. It's the same way it was planned for Hanover. It just sort of seamlessly works whichever place it gets the best communication. But we would be using their infrastructure in our own separate talk groups.
Works kind of like cell phone towers now.
Similar, yes, sir.
Because when I'm
When you
riding down
ride along,
95, I'm
they just-
talking to a tower at Thornburg,
And
and
it's
as I
smooth,
get
seamless.
down to Ladysmith, I talk to that one. So
That is correct.
So I guess as far as impact for next year's budget cycle is concerned, do we have to have for them, because it says here, I want to reiterate this, the proof that funds have been appropriated. We need to show them specifically where we're going to get the revenue.
Right.
for that
What we
service.
first show them is that it's actually in the capital improvements plan for this year,
Okay.
with the $6 million placeholder. And so as we move forward, we would have to work it into next year's budget for the first payment.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Taylor?
Okay. I just need to make sure I understand. Now, one of our concerns before was that if we went with another locality, that we would, or possibly we would be subject to, when they decide to upgrade.
We would still be, so all those things are still relevant. The only reason we would look at another jurisdiction is if the upfront capital cost was sufficient enough to cover what those additional costs may be for upgrade.
Okay. So where we talk about demonstrating a good faith effort, in order to do that, do we not have to sign a contract? Is that not a part of the good faith effort?
That has been in the past on other waivers. This has come from this particular man with the state that has said he doesn't think we would have to have a contract to get our waiver. That's not coming from staff or the committee. This is coming from an individual as a reputable individual with the state, with VITA, that evidently has made some contacts with the FCC. We won't know till we turn the waiver in whether that's going to play out or not.
And don't get me wrong, I'm certainly not suggesting that we spend that kind of money if we don't have to, but what concerns me is if our information turns out to be not correct, we could be facing a hefty fine.
I don't think if we apply for a waiver that they would immediately fine. I think they would probably come back and say, we don't agree with that. We want you to sign a contract and move forward. I don't think they would go from, we sent in a waiver with a lot of detail, because we have a lot of detail. We've been studying this project for several years. We do have a RFP. We have selected a vendor. We're just exploring a couple of last-minute options, and I don't think that they would say, you know, that this didn't have any thought, and it was just something that you put in a waiver with really no thought process. I think we'll be able to show good faith that we're trying to move forward, and I think would have to put, there's got to be a time limit in there that we're going to do this over December or maybe January. At some point in time, we're going to have to sign a contract with somebody and be moving, or we're not going to meet a 2-year waiver request.
All right, so our upcoming budget, will that be a part of our upcoming budget, or does it have to be? And if so, we have one meeting in December. And so are we looking at having to take care of that at that time?
I'm not anticipating we'll have to take care of it in December. I think you'll probably have to take care of it in January, at maybe the latest February. And then you would definitely be budgeting for the expense of the debt service for the FY14 budget. I mean, we've anticipated that all along.
Okay. That's all I have.
I mean, it's really, the change is, the recommendation last week was standalone 700 for the reasons that were outlined. Some of what is, partnering is not going to be without some expense back to the host locality, because we will be using their system. What we didn't know as we went last Wednesday was what the costs were in Spotsy, because they hadn't really selected a vendor. There was no, all I could do was make estimates based on a 5-site system based on the spillover coverage from Hanover, a 5-site system based on the spillover from Spotsylvania. Still got to build 5 tower sites, co-locate, put the infrastructure. 5 sites is 5 sites. So we're still looking at those same cost patterns. What we're trying to do now is negotiate with both counties and see what those user fees, subscriber fees, yearly fee, whatever they might charge to use their base infrastructure, and then determine, is that going to be more over the years than just owning our own system, the whole system, and building 2 extra tower sites for the full 7-site coverage in Caroline. We recommended moving forward with that because we felt that we had to have that much detail in the waiver. So really all that's changed of our recommendation is we've been told by this state employee that his responsibility, a radio expert with the state, that he thinks we can get a waiver without a signed contract at this time to give us a little more time to explore the partnership effort on both ends of the county. So it's really not that much of a change and may not ultimately change what the recommendation was from last week. We may still get to the same point.
Mr. Underwood, you have a question? Seeley?
I would just like to say I'd like to see us just move forward with the waiver, use those 3 options, because I think that's our best avenue right now for getting a waiver, is saying that we're exploring regional options. I think that'll be looked on favorably, and we haven't ruled our standalone option. And let's just move forward and get the waiver going, because we're beyond the ability to make any deadline. We're long past that, so at this point, I think the waiver paperwork just needs to go. And that gives us another month or 2 or 3 to make a decision. it's probably going to take 2 or 3 months to get a decision back anyways. So I'm in favor of just moving forward with the waiver and use those 3 options as what we're exploring.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I am pretty much a self-professed nerd, so I spent an hour on the phone yesterday, thanks to Mr. Parton, talking to the consultant. And I got a lot of information from the consultant, and I also attended a broadband session while at VACO. So just the information I got there was worth the drive time. But there's a couple things to go through. One, and I'm going to repeat this just so everybody in the audience will understand, we have $6 million in our CIP identified for this project. We do not have $8 million, which was the initial bid that was sent to us. So again, we only have $6 million, and we're probably going to negotiate a bit to get it to that point. But anyhow, the radio system, one step is it's a 24-month changeover. So whatever we do, if we did something today, it's going to be 24 months before we actually turn the switch and go to the new radios. So we have all of that time, if technology changes in that quick, to maybe make a quick turn. I doubt it, but once we start on that process, it's going to be a while before we get there. Now, we're also, according to the consultant, we're at step 8 of 12. So when we turn in our waiver request, we're a lot further along than a lot of people who haven't even started. So that may do a little bit more for us. What the consultant said to me, and may or may not be the case, but if our waiver is turned down, we would probably have only a choice of narrow banding in place, which was the $2 million option, to do that right away if our waiver is turned down. That's what he said. We'll need to double check that, of course. But I just wanted to share what I got with the rest of the board. The other thing is he did something like this, or is working on something like this in King and Queen, I believe, and they tied it into their broadband, which is really my whole thing. I don't necessarily want to spend $6 million or $8 million for a single-use system. If we spend $6 million or $8 million, we're only going to get a radio system for public safety and the school bus drivers. If we negotiate our price down, again, according to the consultant, one of his clients had spent $250,000 capitalizing on the assets that he had to add wireless internet connection in that county. So we could have, and this is something I'd personally be willing to be on the committee with to negotiate or help with the waiver or whatever, but we have an opportunity to have a wireless county. We're going to put these towers all across the county with microwaves, and as George said to me during the break, it's a possibility we can do that. I would like us to add that into our waiver to say this is part of what we're going to do, or step B once we do the radio. It won't necessarily help with our waiver, but it will then open up all sorts of grant opportunities through the community, housing and community development has grants. The Department of Agriculture has grants. Senator Warner spoke to me directly about those grants. So let's do something big. If we're going to do it, $6 million is a lot of money. I don't necessarily know that I want to vote for a tax increase that's going to fund that. I really don't have a choice, but I don't know if I'm going to enjoy doing that. But I think if we can provide a lot more to the county citizens, wireless internet, we become, can you imagine, is Gary still here? Can you imagine what Gary could do if we said we're a wireless county? Can you imagine what the business people would say? I mean, it would work for schools. We'd get, the schools, because that's something they want to do. This is a problem. And I look at it as a big lemon. We got 45 days to meet a deadline we can't meet, 46 days. But we can turn that lemon into lemonade and make this the biggest thing that ever happened to the county. Nobody wants to, I don't want my tax, I love the sheriff and fire and rescue. I don't want my personal taxes to go up for them to have a radio system. But I think a lot of other people in the county would say, I'm going to get something wonderful, and I'm going to get something that they need at the same time. We have a chance for a win-win. Now, I said all of that to give you the format, or at least the framework for my thought process. After we do that, or considering that, I think we should go ahead with the waiver request, but add that other step to it, and then at the same time, we could start talking to the Department of Agriculture, housing, community development. There's money out there, and if I spend $100,000, $200,000 on a tower for broadband, I'm putting up a radio tower. It's the same thing. We can use the money. The money can be commingled, so we can have a win-win. That's the way I'd like to see us proceed, and it wouldn't really hurt because we're gonna negotiate whoever it is down to get that extra money to use for that. All right? That was it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right.
I just would like to add, we have negotiated down from 10.3 to the 7.8 that we're at.
But we only have, one more time, if there's anybody in the audience who's interested, we only have $6 million in our CIP.
They're aware of that.
I'm only saying that because the Motorola represents the audience.
Okay.
Can we do that, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if we need a
Need a
motion.
motion for a waiver?
Yeah, I would think we need to make a motion to go ahead and submit the waiver with the three options that are in there. And Mr. Thomas, if you want to add the additional verbiage
Add another
in the
option.
waiver, I see no problem with that as well. I did talk to Sharon Alsop this weekend as
Yes.
well, and they put that system in several years ago. They're upgrading it now, I believe, to some degree. But you're right.
And she
That
said
system
they were
is-
at 98% coverage.
Right. You can make it.
Any other-
Chairman,
Mr.
I
Blatt?
just got a question. I guess my only concern, and I think I'm pretty much in agreement with what you guys are, but my only concern is what Mr. Thomas had said about if the waiver is rejected. I mean, what are the chances that, because the sheriff's office had talked to us about the narrow, going just narrow banding the regular system. I'm not so sure that, me personally, that I'm comfortable with just straight up narrow banding,
I'm just repeating to you what the consultant told me, and I gave you my 60-minute conversation in 5. What he did say, because that was my first question. I said, what happens if the waiver fails? And he said they will probably tell you to narrow band in place.
Do we know, I mean, I know I'm asking to be a soothsayer here, but do we know what are the chances of that happening, I guess?
That's nobody.
I talked to the consultant in the parking lot after our meeting last week, and he said we have been through enough of the steps that he's fairly confident
12.
that a waiver is not going to be an issue because it's not like we haven't done anything.
Okay.
We have gone through a lot of the wickets, and there are 75% of the counties in New Jersey have done 1 or 2 steps or less. This is U.S.-wide. The waiver in Congress, there's a congressman has put in a bill that's still in committee to actually extend it 2 years. Every locality in his district has done nothing. So we are infinitely ahead of all of those folks. And that was the bill that I was watching to see if we were going to automatically get 2 years no matter what, but it hasn't come out of committee. So at the national level, we are head and shoulders above many, many, many folks. So I think the waiver, everybody's probably going to have to apply, and everybody's probably going to have to react.
You make it a 12-month waiver, and he says, okay, do something in 12 months or in 3 months, you got to have this, and that done. But he did
Right.
say we were at step 8 of 12, and he did say he was getting calls from clients that hadn't done anything. So
A number of people have done nothing.
yeah, it's like going to court. You never know who's going to win, but we've got the most on our side.
Yeah, and I guess my concern comes from the fact that the consultant is now telling us these things, but last Wednesday night, there was a discussion for probably 2 hours on this particular issue, and the recommendations from the consultant and from the committee was that we had to do something right away. By the 4th of December, we had to make a contract. And that bothers me when you put the fear of God into me.
Well, he's
then
saying the same thing, though.
No, he didn't the other
No,
night.
the Vita people are saying something different.
Yeah, but I'm saying, you said the consultant, you spoke with this consultant, and he said that, yeah, he thought. It was said the other night, number one, didn't think we would get a waiver without a contract being signed. The consultant said that. And so I question.
I didn't say
the
he
cons-
I didn't really say the consultant said we would get a waiver.
You indicated that the
I
consultant.
said we were at step 8 of 12.
And he
We
saw there's no
probably
problem,
would.
and he had no problem.
No, well, we're step 8 of 12. We probably, and that's, the roll of dice. We probably would because we're that far ahead.
Right.
I'm not, I can
So
get
the
him on the phone
consultant
if
didn't
you want
tell
to
you
talk to him.
that he did not think we would get a waiver.
He didn't say, yes, we'll get a waiver. He didn't say, no, we won't get a waiver. He said, we've done a lot of steps and we're a lot further ahead than other people. So the odds, I'm saying the odds on us getting a waiver, since we're at step 8 of 12, should be good if the people that make that determination are fair and reasonable. But they could be ones that say no.
I'm saying to staff and saying to everybody, is the fact that when you bring a recommendation to this board and say it is urgent that we make a decision, that we are at our limit, we have nowhere else to go, then this board needs to act, or it's going to be blamed for inaction. Don't come telling me that we had to at the drop dead point, and then a week later saying, oh, but these are some things we didn't think about, and we can move on with some other avenue. That's all I'm saying. Same way with the consultant.
Good point.
The consultant did not indicate the other night when he came to us and we discussed for 2 hours that there was a possibility that we could get a waiver. And that's my concern. Okay.
Could I add one thing? When I spoke to Mr. Parton, I asked if the consultant could be here tonight. And I understand we're close to expending all of the funds for that contract. Well, I'm only speaking for me, but I would think the rest of the board would have said it's much more important to have the consultant here and go over our contract costs than not have him here and us basically talk about him and second-hand things. So I don't know. I'm sure the rest of you would say we might as well have him here so we can talk even if it costs us a little bit more money, or maybe I'm just the only one saying that. But in the next time, maybe you should poll the board and see if we want to go over it. But I'm ready to make a motion if you are, Mr. Chairman.
We're about to spend $8 million, or whatever the dollar amount is.
6.
It's no small amount of money.
5.3.
So we need to.
Okay, I'm ready to make a motion. Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Go ahead.
I would motion that the board direct staff to submit a waiver with regards to the FCC mandate to narrowband our public safety radio system based on the options staff has already outlined, directly with the vendor, evaluating options with the surrounding counties.
2 surrounding counties.
The 2 surrounding counties, as mentioned before. And I would also ask that staff add into our contract negotiations the capability to use those towers, whatever equipment we have, for the purpose of providing wireless internet capabilities for county residents.
I'm not going to repeat the motion. I think everybody heard the motion.
I will second that.
All right. Motion by Mr. Thomas, seconded by Mr. Seeley.
And I will volunteer
Discussion,
my services to
discussion
help.
on the motion. I would only say, and it's not fully in response to his motion, but I did talk to Mr. Williams with King William County. He indicates that there's a tower on the border or near the border of Caroline County and King William. They are tying in with Hanover, and it could be we could use their tower to feed over into Caroline, and we may not have to put in but 2 towers or 3 towers if we deal with Hanover County along those lines. All right. Further discussion on the motion. All in favor, vote by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay, and the motion is carried.
Wow.
Number 5, continued first reading of an ordinance of the Board of Supervisors electing to assume the power to consider petitions for the creation of community development authorities.
Oh, yeah.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is a continuation of the discussion on the CDAs, Community Development Authorities. As the board has requested in the past, we've had all their questions answered, and the board also directed, on the advice of counsel, that a policy be developed, guidelines on how to handle the program should we ever get an application. And our attorneys have provided us with such a guideline. It is an exhaustive policy guideline. It is very thorough, and I think Mr. Emerson would attest that it is highly protective of the board for any kind of future mishaps and so forth. It takes in all the latest understanding of the actions of CDAs around the state and how they've performed, and it's also included in this document. So I think the board has been given the documentation that it has requested, and I think Mr. Emerson probably could answer any questions related to the policy guidelines that they've prepared.
All right. Board have any questions of Mr. Wilson or of the county attorney? Any comments?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Seeley?
I must have picked up the wrong pile. That's all right. One of the issues that we talked about that still I haven't seen covered is in the event that the CDA collects dollars, as has happened in other localities, and the CDA has money, but they don't pay their local real estate taxes. But there's money in the CDA. Now, Fredericksburg's going through that now. The treasurer and the commissioner of the revenue have said they will take the money out of the CDA to pay their local real estate taxes. We still, it was one of the long-standing questions that we had. I still don't see an answer to that or how we're going to handle that.
Well, it's my understanding that the payment of the taxes is prioritized.
Well, that's in court, so everybody's understanding may be different.
Well, that's in court because the CDA documents didn't state exactly how it would be handled. So at the time you approved a CDA, you would want to be sure that was in that issue was clarified in those documents that were approved.
And we have not addressed that yet.
You wouldn't address that until you had an application.
CDA came before us.
So that shouldn't be in any of our preliminary documents, how that'll be handled up front? It's just a question. I don't know.
The more you restrict things, I mean, you could do that. The more, you're trying to have a policy that gives you information, that states the information and all that you want, but doesn't prejudge and make situations too restrictive before you get them before you to consider them, if I'm making sense. I mean, you don't want to scare people off, exactly. But that is, and frankly, we may have a determination by the time you get an application through the court system. I mean, they may say the treasurer doesn't have that authority, or the treasurer does have the authority to allocate tax money to any taxes that are due in whatever order the treasurer deems appropriate. And if that's the case, then it's really moot. It'll be interesting to see how that case turns out.
Because they keep, the theme that keeps being drummed is that the locality has no liability, and I don't know that that is strictly true. For the most part, we don't have a liability as long as everything moves smoothly. In the event that it doesn't, I guess, and I'm just making sure I understand what we're talking about when we say no liability. Because that's true as long as everybody's paying.
We tried to address that in the memo that we sent you a while back, too, that there's no liability for the debts of the CDA or the bonds of the CDA unless you specifically took it on again at the time you approved the CDA. But certainly there are other potential situations that could arise that might make the county want to spend money due to various political or other pressures that might be brought to bear, not the least being perhaps the taxpayers in the CDA itself wanting some relief from you know, the debt service that's been taken on by a developer who then sold them property and is long gone when the CDA bonds go into default. So, I mean, there's sort of a number of, they're kind of limitless ways that things can play out. So you can't really, and they're all highly dependent on the facts of any given situation. So it's other than to give you examples of things that could happen, you can't really say this will happen or that there, you know, would never be any pressure for the county to reach into its coffers, so to speak, to do something, not necessarily to pay the debt service on the bonds, but to do something. Which is why you want to look at them very carefully when they come before you, and why, if you look at the policy, there are various monies to be paid by the developer requesting the CDA so that the county can hire consultants to help it, and to you know, look at all the potential scenarios and you know, devise a plan that protects the county.
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's Mr. Emerson or Mr. Wilson, but I'll start Mr. Emerson. Bless you. Let's assume, because this whole thing is being generated by Carmel Church Station, right?
Not necessarily, well, that is an initiator, but
That's the initiator, right.
That is the initiator.
Okay. So if I lived next door to Carmel Church Station, across the street or the adjacent parcel, whatever, when the CDA is defined, do I have to define the CDA as the boundaries of their property? Or would I could include other areas?
Yes, that's one of the problems. Well, that's one of the potential
Which would not make me happy if I was next door.
It would not. It's been done before, though, in others.
But I could...
You need 51% of the property owners or the owners of the 51% of the assessed value in the geographical region.
Oh, wait.
So you can pull in 49%.
Oh, no, I caught that math. Okay, they own 500 acres. I own 2. My neighbor owns 2, and so on and so on. So the people with 10 acres are, you know, 1%, 2% of the whole project. Oh, no.
But
No.
that's why the board needs to look at it very carefully.
So the board has, and I'm sure this is part of it and why we've left it slightly vague to start, but we would define the CDA as tight as possible to only affect the people in that particular area, or the people actually request.
Right.
We would only, in this
You would
case,
only approve a petition that, if that were the way you looked at it as the Board of Supervisors, yes, then you would only approve a petition that, say, the developer owned 100% of the property.
Right.
Something along those lines. So
And that's, I mean, I have that authority and all that. Okay.
you do.
Because I would find a little issue if you included me in the CDA for a rail project. I mean, just me personally. And I'm sure all the surrounding people would have the same issue. So I think I'm representing them in that sense. So as long as we can define that, and that's our choice. Because if Carmel Church Project or Carmel Church Station came and said they wanted to include everything from halfway up to Ladysmith till halfway down to Dawn, we could say, yeah, nice try, guys, have a nice day.
Right.
Okay.
Right. You don't.
Okay.
This doesn't mean. I mean, the adoption of the ordinance doesn't mean that you have to approve any CDA ever anywhere in the county. It just allows you to consider applications for them that somebody might bring before you, and the policy is there to define preliminarily the information that you would want to see before you even considered it, as well as some hefty payments for you to be able to pay people to help you consider it, and some surety down the road to make sure that they're around for a while to fulfill their financial and other obligations in the CDA. So there's a fair amount in the policy to protect the county so that it can actually make, so the board can actually make informed decisions about any particular CDA application that might come before you.
I feel much better.
One
Thank
of,
you.
one of the things that I like, about a